The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. Welcome to Disrupt Education. I'm Peter Hostrasser, the host. Thank you all for being here. Do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you to subscribe, and please leave some feedback. I like to hear from everybody out there on whatever platform you're listening or watching. There'll be an opportunity to do that. I have a wonderful guest today on the podcast. She is an applied researcher in multimedia education programming. And has been doing it since 2007 for all ages. So I'm excited. Dr. Rachel Schechter is here with me. Rachel, it's great having you here on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so great how you've been really elevating voices from all across education, because there are so many voices and people that you might not even know who are making an effort to help support our learners of all ages.
Oh, appreciate it. Yeah, this is one of those connections in the middle of pandemic time and change and shift. So with that being said, can you kind of go deeper into who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, starting from right after I got out of grad school, I realized that I really like helping adults. I like helping adults who help children. And what I found is when I can help the adults understand what about their program works, or what about their child's development that they can help support, then I realized, wow, I'm actually helping a pair. I'm helping a dyad. I'm helping a relationship strengthen, deepen, and then that relationship can actually help that young person or that learner for the rest of their lives. And that's what I really understood, is that when I can train the trainer, or even train the trainer of the trainers, I can really make a big impact.
That's wonderful. So, well, so you've been doing this research, the active research, since 2007, which is, let's do the math here. That's a good over a decade before a lot of people were really diving deep into it, or the pivot was happening like right now. So before we get into that, I want what was your educational path like? What kind of student were you?
That is such a great question. So I was a child in the 80s, and believe it or not, or maybe not believe it or not, but like many other children, I was actually bullied as a young person. And I had friends who were as well. I had a tough time in school. And for me, what really helped ground me was the arts. And that supportive environment, that elevation of something I was good at and something that I could connect with others, on stage or off stage. And I saw that the arts actually was like a saving grace and really a psychologically safe place for so many of us growing up. And that's actually what really inspired me to look for a college where I could pursue math, which was another one of the things that I was really good at and really enjoyed. And I also had great math teachers, especially in high school, who even sometimes combined the arts and math in interesting and integrative ways. So that's what brought me to the University of Massachusetts to study math and theater at the same time. And it was so fun. It was so amazing that they had this opportunity. They called it the Bachelor's Degree of Individual Concentration, where I could study both education and theater and media. And that's where I got a chance to work on the first and second season of Dora the Explorer, actually.
Now everybody's got a question. So like, wait a minute, hold up.
I know, I kind of laid a lot out of you in one answer. So.
No, I love it. So Dora the Explorer, and working on that, what capacity? Because that was a huge game changer. I will tell you, even for my kids, who are now 16 and 13, seems like ages ago, but yeah, that was very formative in their formative years of finding and. My daughter would play Dora in the backyard. So now I'm geeked. So tell us a little bit about what was that experience like? And then, there was a lot of different things going on there. Especially, you look at different culture and different, learning. Yeah, do tell.
All right. So I didn't really realize this at the time, but when I went to the University of Massachusetts, I discovered Dan Anderson. Professor Dan Anderson actually helped co-create that type of media that we saw with Blue's Clues, which is where the character spoke directly to the camera and like waited, right, blinking, for the audience at home to respond and to retrieve information, that retrieval practice, and participate and really feel like you were playing a part of the story. So it was kind of maybe a risk for them to decide to make this show, Dora the Explorer, which was going to be about this Latina young girl, and she was going to solve adventures and mysteries, but also be using this talk to camera approach. So I got an opportunity to do a full-time internship in Manhattan, and I actually lived at home, so I got to spend some extra time with my parents as well at the time. And I got to do both a research internship and a production internship. So I'll focus on the research internship, but I can tell you a funny story maybe another day about a bloody foot that made a squeaky sound that I had to go find. But I'll save that for another day. But the story I will share with you is when I went out to do some user research. This is really where I saw the power of research to change the trajectory of an entire learning experience. So I was sitting in the back of the room, and what we would do is have these groups of preschoolers come in and out and kind of rotate in and out while we read them the script. And we had these little puppets that we made. So it was a little bit more than just reading a story. And the key thing in Dora the Explorer was that we had a question at the beginning where the kids had to basically say, yay, me, yay, me. So in this episode, the question was, do you like to get mail? And the response was crickets. So that's not what we wanted. So when that group of children left, before the next one came in, I raised my hand and I said, maybe we should change the line. And really putting my empathy cap on, right? Thinking about what is it like to be 4 years old in Manhattan? It's like, I don't know that many 4-year-olds who might get mail.
Right.
But at the time, going to the post office might have been a weekly adventure. So I said, what if we change the line to, do you like to go to the post office? We changed the line. The next group of kids yelled, me, 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 me. And I really saw the power of how research can impact that story and the experience.
Yeah. And so from that point, you went deeper into your education, got your Ph.D. What was that like? Because this obviously had to be a moment in your life. You're like, wait, I can see the power of this. Obviously, like you're helping people, you can almost see like the data collection. You can see the art in this, which is wonderful. Tell us a little bit about like the next steps after that.
Yep. So when I graduated then I got my arts and education master's degree at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And what I saw right away, I was looking for a job, an arts education job. And there aren't that many of those, unfortunately. Right. I was so grateful to be in the Boston area where there were actually a lot of music schools. And I got my first job as the manager, actually, of a music school with 1,500 families, 90 teachers, 24 spaces that I had to coordinate. And that's where I learned about the power, again, of relationships, but this time different relationships. This is the relationship, and it's kind of like this triangle of a relationship: the teacher, the family, and the student. So parents, student, teacher, this relationship. And one of the biggest things I learned right away was expectations, how expectations can really help set up a relationship to fail or to succeed. So I really saw firsthand how those conversations that kind of set two people up to meet, how important they are, and have to reflect the personalities and the needs and the strengths of the folks in the relationship. So I was doing this on my own, discovering it all by myself and like talking to people, coworkers and friends. What do you think about this? Why do you think this works? Why do you think that works? And I had a lot of why questions. And I have to say, a lot of my friends didn't have a lot of answers. And that's why I went back to school to get my PhD, because I realized I was asking a lot of questions, deep, complicated questions about why are some learning relationships and some learning experiences effective and not effective? And that's why I went back to school.
Oh, I love that question. Is probably just that word why is such an important question. And pivoting into where we are now, and how all of a sudden the surface why questions were always out there. But I think when the pandemic hit, and you can elaborate on this, we started to go deep into more of those questions. And I think a lot more of those people you were talking about who didn't have the answers are now starting to seek those answers. What do you see as, something that you have seen changed since we call it D-Day in education? It was March 13th, right? In here in Illinois, I'm not sure. I think pretty much across the nation it was.
Yeah, for sure.
What that started something. So what are some of the big shifts that you've seen? The experiences that you have as an expert who's 13 years prior to this thing happening, really digging deep into those. What are some of the shifts that you've liked and some of the things that we're struggling with?
Thank you so much for that question. One of the phrases that I used back last year was, we felt, right, the rug was pulled out from under us. And a year later, I was actually got a chance to attend Digital Learning Day. This was about 2 weeks ago, the end of February. I think it's like the last Wednesday in February every year. They just had their 10th year anniversary, actually. And one of the speakers, keynote speakers, said that every teacher felt like a first-year teacher. And when I heard that, I was like, yes, that really is what it was. You didn't have those lessons in your file drawer to just pull out every March when we always do this. Or I love Dr. Seuss's birthday. We always do rhyming. Dr. Seuss's birthday. You can't just pull out that go-to always works for me lesson, because you just can't. And even if you do, how the stress and cognitive load, right? To have to figure out, well, how am I going to do this thing that I know usually works in this totally different way for this totally, and students who are not in the same place that they might have been this time last year. So that's really what it was, is that nothing really you didn't have any go-tos, right? Those go-tos, and feeling like a first-year teacher again, when maybe you hadn't been in a long time, just your I could imagine, right? Their confidence and, again, that cognitive load just being constantly taxed. That was the challenge. That was the change. I completely agree with that. It was very scary, but invigorating. I'll let you know that I put a tweet out there right after it happened. I believe this was going to be the best year, the most educational year for me as an educator, and I will admit it has been, with through the goods and the bads. Can you identify some of the cool, really nice, great things, some success stories that are happening? Have you seen things where people are, you're like, yes, I've been talking about this or researching this, and people are doing this? Absolutely. So one of the key things is how much small group instruction we ended up having, forced small group instruction ended up happening, and where teachers were able to use maybe data, right, that was from that new program that they purchased. So students would be able to practice their math or practice their reading, or explore maybe topics, for our older students, maybe explore topics or read nonfiction texts, and put them together in new ways and leverage small groups and have that time and possibly flexibility that they didn't have before. I'm hearing amazing, incredible stories of teacher agency where they actually have been able to get that flexibility, to take back their time, use it in new ways, actually in some ways fewer constraints, or at least different constraints, that then they could really wrap their head around, wrap their arms around, and end up creating really engaging programming, and have more student agency. Like, look at these incredible classrooms, like Google Classrooms that I'm seeing, where students actually have the time and space to explore these really high quality, handcrafted resources that teachers have been putting so much time and effort to really curate for their class.
I think one of the most amazing things that have happened is it's almost like educators have now created their own PD, right? Like, that's kind of where we met. There's Clubhouse, there's LinkedIn, there's all these different places. Twitter has always been there. In what ways have you seen, and you have even worked with many teachers and led things, talk about how that's changed over the last year, and what are some of the strategies and the things that you're doing to help educators and students move forward?
Yes. So one of the things that I've seen, and when schools have been able to do this well, it's been incredibly powerful, is the collective efficacy, or the collective action of teachers working together to come up with plans and share resources together. I imagine that when you're in the classroom and you have these walls separating you, maybe sometimes it can feel competitive to, oh, she's doing this over there and she's doing, and he's doing that over there. I wonder if this change was an opportunity to come together again, because we're all doing something new, and let's all really share what's working. And, oh, I found this incredible resource. Oh, let's all do that next week together. Right. So I think that the PD that folks are going out and bringing back to maybe their grade level PLCs, or bringing them to their, maybe even the principal or some other school-wide staff member who's helping spread the word. We no longer have to be sitting in a chair, sitting in a seat at one time at that moment to get some rich insights and to share information in hopefully a faster, more efficient, and really in a way that everybody can benefit from some of these programs. And how many free programs and online programs there have been. I mean, I think I've signed up for 5 or 6 different conferences just this month alone that have all been free and asynchronously available. Just amazing.
It's making it a lot interesting, or a lot more interesting, in when you say in the classroom. It's that physical space and is not really there. I mean, we're in a hybrid situation where I'm at, so some students do come in, and it's fun. I mean, it was incredibly challenging at first, and I can see where people were a little bit hesitant. But I will tell you, I really enjoy it because, it's the funniest thing that's happened to me is a student has, and I know I've said this on other podcasts, but a student has asked me from their home, can I go use the restroom? And I just laugh, and I'm just like, this is where we're going forward. And I always joke, can't you just swing by the fridge and grab me something to eat, just, because it's their space, and to work with that. And we have seen of that collaboration. What are some of the things that you see that we should probably take along with us and grow with after or as this pandemic subsides? I never like using the term go back. I don't think we should ever go back. I think we should, keep the things that were working somewhat, but also improve upon things. What are some of those things?
Absolutely. So when I was at Tufts, I had to pick what I was going to do for my dissertation. And, I say I pick, but really a lot of times for PhD students, their choices are actually quite limited. They have to pick a question that's based on their funding. And what I decided is I actually went back to my experience in my mind of Dora the Explorer. And I said, I want to do a research project that brings me back to the impact that I made there. So I applied for the Fred Rogers Memorial Scholarship, Graduate Research Scholarship. And you know what, Peter? I did not get it. Not the first time. And I took my feedback and I went back to the drawing board and did some more research and talked to more people. And when I applied the second time, I did get it. So that just goes to show you, try again.
Right.
And when I was at the Fred Rogers Center, I think I was actually there when Angela Santomero heard the call from the Fred Rogers folks to create Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. So back to where we were. Okay, but if you think about Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and then what I ended up researching was Sid the Science Kid. And in both of these cases, what it was is the concept of using songs, using short clips, using a little something that shows visually or musically or in a catchy way, something interesting. And then once you have the student's attention and they learn a little bit about it, then you go and do hands-on. Go and do it, explore it, check it out, play with it, turn it upside down, make it silly, whatever it is. But don't use 22 minutes if you don't have to show a long video. So my dissertation was looking at the Sid the Science Kid episode, which was like 22 minutes long, right? And comparing it to the impact of the 90-second song that was in that same episode. So I was able to show 4 and 5-year-olds that 90-second song, and they got just as much science out of it as the 22-minute episode. So I said, don't waste 22 minutes if you only have a half an hour for science a week, which a lot of these schools actually only do about a half an hour of science a week. Just do that 90 seconds, get them interested, get them hooked. And then, so vocabulary is what the kids missed, by the way, that's what I found in my research, is that they understood the engineering of the police system, and they were able to describe it in their own words, but they didn't kind of catch the vocabulary, the academic vocabulary. But we can teach the alphabet, that vocabulary, before or after we show that little video. It's not a big deal. We can complement that and supplement it, but we don't need to use 22 minutes. And I think that a lot of teachers right now time was always a precious resource. It always has been. But I think that over the past year, teachers have been figuring out how to leverage technology, right, to maximize time, to have learning both personalized and accelerated. And I think the other thing I want to share with you is something I learned. So when I've been, so last year, as part of being the vice president of learning sciences at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, I had the amazing opportunity to bring together scholars from all over the country. One of those scholars was an expert in research and personalization. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. And I've been telling other folks, EdTech companies I've been talking to over the past few months about this. It's that when you have a student who's behind, okay, and they're doing something that's personalized, you have a student who's on track and they're doing something that's personalized, what actually can happen is the gap between them over time can grow, because the student who's behind is still kind of very slowly improving, but our student who's ahead is actually quickly improving, so the gap can widen. So personalization is important for so many reasons, but we have to layer on top of that acceleration. And that's going to be key moving forward, that we leverage technology to both personalize and target, but also accelerate for those who need it.
Hence the 22 minutes versus 90 seconds. I love that. It makes so much sense. I can actually see the graph as you spoke that. That's brilliant. I love that. It reminds me of a story when I was in college. It was an English course in my undergrad, and the professor asked us about metamorphosis, right? And I'll be honest, I haven't read it at that moment. And a young man next to me just brilliantly laid out the answer to the question. I can't remember exactly what the question was. And I asked him later, I'm like, did you like read that? And he's like, no, it was an MTV commercial. And that was what made me, but it was spot on, because it was like a 60-second commercial, and it makes sense. So your entire dissertation like flashed in front of my eyes there, which is brilliant.
Well, I can tell you there's so much from advertising that we can learn, and from arts and culture that we can learn, because if you think about, and in fact, I really appreciate studying advertising. And I actually, when I think about communication, I go to the advertising literature. There's a lot of literature on marketing and advertising. And I also look at economics, so behavioral economics. These are like these complementary sciences and research fields that we should be looking at and incorporating in education. So that's the other thing that I really like to do when I'm working with EdTech teams, is bringing in some of these sciences, not just evaluation sciences or traditional research, but also our learning sciences, so neurosciences, cognitive sciences, as well as, and this is kind of a newer thing, it's called implementation sciences. It's the ease of use, it's the buy-in, it's the relationships and everything that's contextual in the ecosystem that we call our schools, all the whole ecosystem around the classroom or virtual classroom, really, I guess the learning experience, right? There's so much going on. We have to be pulling from all of these places.
And that last one was just my next question. It was about, so as an educator, I'm in the secondary field. I have a lot of friends and family who are in the primary field as well. Neither one of us want to cross paths, by the way. I don't want to go there because it's like, I don't know, each one of us have these special skills. But with that culture of learning, one of the things that I'll admit myself and some of my colleagues are struggling with is that culture of, let's get out of the way of the student. Let's give the student their personalized journey, yet they're still in the check the box kind of mentality. What are some strategies that you've seen or opinions or research that actually goes into how do we do that? How do we change that culture? What does that look like?
Thank you. Great question. So, and kind of when we think about art and art education, what we often do is we learn the basics. We learn the scales, right? We study the greats, but right away, children are making it their own. I mean, my 3-year-old is making up his own song. And even if maybe students are just watching from the side, I have an example with I know I have little kids, so yeah. and because I'm not a teacher in the classroom like you and so many of the listeners today, I'll just speak from my home and the learning I've been doing here. My daughter wasn't really actually into the science experiments that we were doing all last summer and spring. My son was interested, and he liked blowing things up and having them explode and colors and dancing candy, all this stuff. But my daughter was really mostly watching. But when I told her there was an opportunity for an art contest that had to do with hearts, and I said, I'm thinking wouldn't it be cool if we had hearts that were kind of exploding? And I'm thinking of something like, paint and a heart, some very literal hearts. I don't know, like a flower of hearts. That's kind of my vibe, right? And she said, well, what if we made it an experiment and we used baking soda and snow and red food coloring, and then we exploded it? Now, I thought she wasn't that into it. I thought she was, she was watching, but she didn't seem that interested in the science experiments. But when it was paired, right, with this challenge of an art contest that had to have a theme of a heart or love or hearts or something, she went back to, wouldn't that be so cool if we used the explosion, right? That word explosion really got her inspired. She completely came up with the entire thing herself. And, it's really nice. She actually won the art contest.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
She took the photo herself. She poured the vinegar herself. She did she did everything. She did almost all of it herself. And I mean, it was really just inspiring for me to see how really it's, even though she didn't seem that interested in it, and even though I had no idea what she was going to get from it, she really learned a lot, even from just supporting her brother learning. Yeah. So we never know, right? And I think that's another thing to remember, is that that every single student doesn't have to be totally psyched about every activity we throw out there, because sometimes they may get a ton out of it from supporting someone else who's psyched. And then if we keep mixing it up and we are flexible, we're actually going to be able to engage different students in different ways and at different times. And we'll learn so much from them about when we give them some freedom to do that, their own creating. We're going to learn from them. And then we're actually going to be more shared in creating learning experiences together.
I love that. It reminds me of, the fact that our kids, especially at the secondary level, are the best poker players ever. Because they'll pull out the royal flush and you're like, just like your daughter, I see it all the time. So that's great advice. I wanted to kind of wrap things up here and ask about, okay, you give a lot of services and different things. I want to ask how you're helping people and how people can actually connect with you and learn more about what you do. Absolutely. So the best way is to go to my website and really just check out the different things that I have up there. One of the biggest things I'm doing right now, in addition to talking to EdTech companies on particular projects, I do a lot of writing.
and sharing little bite-sized resources. And I could even help work with you to create some communications about really bringing in the data and the science and meeting your needs for the audience that you're working with. So right now, really, I'm doing a lot of work with communication and how do we have data-driven communication to help inspire, to help inform, and to help identify needs or resources, all different kinds of things like that. The other project I just started working on, which is really exciting, and I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to share back with me what would be helpful, is I'm working with ISTE, the International Society for Technology Education, on a new project that's related to their course of mind study, which is bringing and creating a learning sciences framework to help make it easier and to pick effective and efficient educational technology projects for your school and your students.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, in all of this, it is truly inspiring to see a lot of people get together, share resources, and, you know, the future holds a lot of change, but I think there's a lot of hope in it due to people like you who just have really seen, you know, the change in all levels, done the research, and now, you know, there's going to be a lot of systems that are going to be seeking this change, and I think we're lucky to have you. So
I think there's just one more thing I want to share.
Please.
And it's that there have been a lot of people researching educational services and methods and products for a really long time. And what's really key is your local context. And what are your needs and what are your strengths? Because you need to find the right program or people or materials that are going to help boost to bring your strengths up, to leverage your strengths and kind of work around where you need help, what your needs are. And that's going to be different for everybody. The average school, I think, uses over 500 educational programs with any combination of students. And really, it's almost like we all have to become our own researchers, right? To evaluate, to see what's working, to see what our needs are, and be flexible as those needs and strengths change. And that's really the key, is helping everyone become their own researchers in creating excellent learning experiences for you and your students.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I want to ask you, so now you just brought up one more question, is about how are you working with student voice in that? How does that come into play? Student voice is something that's thrown around. I think in certain cases it's really used and there's action behind it. In some cases it's check the box, but I really agree with you on the communities, the individual systems, and then even, you know, becoming an individual researcher. What are some strategies that we let our students do that?
Absolutely. So one of the first things, and it might seem straightforward, but create a space and a method for students to share their ideas. I mean, even in companies, so I work a lot with companies and thinking about employee engagement and employee voice. And I can tell you that the first thing you need to do is have a way for people to give feedback. So many people don't even know where or how or when or what. And then also a way to share an idea anonymously. And I know that with students, there are so many ways that we can do that through exits. I always kind of go back to like exit slips or little pieces of paper or something like that. But digitally, there are also ways that you can do that so easily with like a Google form that anyone can go in. You have no idea who sent it. And I have no handwriting you can identify. But having a method that's easy, that's always available, and that has the option of being anonymous is a great first step if you don't already have that. And then another thing is to elevate student voice, because once you start hearing what the students are sharing with you, when you acknowledge what you heard and then make the change that you can. Some folks are afraid to hear what students have to say because they don't want to change. And that's backwards. Let's listen. There's almost always something that we can do to help support our students based on what their needs are. So we need to create that venue. We need to let them know we heard them. And then when we are able to make action on their needs and their voice, we need to actually celebrate it and explicitly say a student helped us make this decision.
Yeah.
A student voice informed this decision or this change or this new amazing thing, and really share the accomplishment with the students. So when students see that you shared the accomplishment, that will also fuel them to give their voice again. Do you see how that would work?
And others, and others,
it's a cycle,
right?
It's a cycle,
Yeah.
right? So you have to start it, but then you also have to follow through with the sharing. So
wonderful,
that's my
wonderful.
recommendation.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I've seen other students pick up on this, and then all of a sudden, I feel like that's what we're doing here. Like the teachers and everybody getting together is like, wait, I've had like 3 more educators jump on Clubhouse and say, hey, are you in here too? You know, so it does breed a really kind of movement of more research, really, and individualized research, like you said.
Great.
Dr. Rachel Schechter, thank you so much for hanging out with us on Disrupt Education. Really appreciate you and all you're doing for education.
Thank you. And thank you for helping elevate all these voices that you might not have otherwise heard. Peter, you're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Humbled. And thank you all for listening and watching. We'll see you next time on Disrupt Education.